Isis Astarte Diana Hecate Demeter Kali Inanna. 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 Last week, I said I'd be happy to talk about my personal journey with the goddess from the pulpit if people wished, and then I got called on it. I could have put it off, but in the next month or so, we're going to have services honoring Hindu and Buddhist traditions in October. And after reflecting a bit with Sarah, we thought, wow, maybe we're not just doing the principles, we're doing the sources as well. So, and there's more coming at you. So I started writing, and at about 18 pages, I thought, I should probably trim this down a bit. So here we go. So let's wander back a bit to 1984. And for those of you who are with us, I have to say that it's not often a sort of personal witness from the pulpit, but you never know what's going to happen here. So let's wander back a bit to 1984 when I arrived at Union Theological Seminary. I had no idea what a good school union was, no idea what I was getting into. I just knew I didn't want to leave New York. At that point, I'd lived there 9 years. Culturally, I was fairly sophisticated. I'd had a great job that I enjoyed and was good at and made good money. I was single. It was New York in the 70s and 80s with a little bit of travel thrown in. Let's leave this portion with the notion that I'd been having a lot of fun. Life wasn't quite right, though, so I started a master's in organizational design at Pepperdine, and some very happenstantial meetings during that program made me realize that not only did I not want to continue in business, but I also really, really, really wanted to go to seminary. The only communities of change that I knew and was comfortable with were church communities. Theologically, however, I was stuck back in the 60s when I left my church after high school. While in Sweden, my church community had embraced the Jesus movement and decided that I wouldn't fit. How right they were. College was fun, Sunday mornings were early, and that didn't change when I got to New York. I spent my first few years' worth of Sunday mornings having brunch. But eventually, I missed church. The rhythm of the year, a multi-generational society, worship. It wasn't an easy find, however. I, in fact, visited All Souls. It was a meat market. There was a place, they had a lot of singles stuff going on, and it was really unnerving. And it wasn't what I was looking for in church, even if Forest Church was preaching. So eventually, however, I wound up at Union one bright September day. They had just started rules about the use of gender-neutral language for everyone and everything. God was no longer the Father. Beloved theologies were revealed to be hierarchical, patriarchal, and racist. There was plenty, and speciesist as well, as we found out. It was a tough first semester, I'm telling you. But there was plenty of work to do, and Tom Driver took one look at me and handed me first Matt Fox, who is a creation-centered theologian, and Starhawk, who is probably the best-known Wiccan writer. I felt as I'd been hit with a brick. However, I have never read so much in my life or with such delight. I took workshops and explored native and woman-centered worldviews. I have never had such good and demanding mentors. it's a challenge for me to figure out how to get to what it is for me about the notion that the divine is also feminine, and that transformed my life, and do that in the under 4 pages that a good sermon is. It was an interesting thing to remember the process of moving from the feminine in opposition to the masculine to a place of building on the feminine, to a place of understanding that my faith wasn't something that stood against a bunch of things, but actually was something that helped me grow and progress. But so I have a bunch of bullet points, and I'm going to try and talk about it. So the first is the notion of a God present is part of my religious experience. The notion of God with me has been both comforting and stimulating. When the hand on my arm was the mother's, it was different in some way. The constant presence was reassuring, even when the message wasn't. It is the hand that leads or pushes me to step up and reassures me when I do. You may have a different explanation for those things, but I try to hold myself accountable to this one. For me, the presence was also the mystery. Excuse me. Goodness. Incarnation has also been a central understanding for me. Our bodies are important and sacred. To understand God as also female was not to have to see myself as less than when I considered being made in the image. You have to understand, I was raised in the 50s and 60s. You name it, women didn't do it. We were not enough on our own. I went to seminary in 1984, never having seen a woman minister. I thought I was going to learn how to teach Sunday school. There I learned that it was possible for me to hold holy words in my mouth, holy visions in my soul. I learned that my body was a sacred vessel for word and deed as it is. You know, it was very interesting. I was clicking through something on the HuffPost the other day, and it was talking about women in religion. There were 51 women who are major players in religion, and I have to say not one of them was a UU, although why Tandeka wasn't there, I don't know. But one of the women who was there was a woman by the name of Chung Hyung Kyung, who is Korean, and who started seminary as she'd been to seminary already, and she came to Union to start a PhD. Her husband, also Korean, got into Princeton, and she was this beautiful, very small, very petite, everybody's prototype of the Asian woman, softly spoken. I was in voice building with her, and she came, and we were to bring a poem or something to read, and she brought 2, and the first one was this big, bold, ugly poem. And then she said, but, and then she went to something that she might read for children in Sunday school, and that progressed in her. She is one of the foremost women, certainly Asian theologians. But I remember her standing one year at a large gathering of all of the alums, and she was giving the prayer, and she's gorgeous, and she had on this beautiful peach, I've forgotten what the dresses are called now, but the Korean dress, and it's big and bell-like, and her voice was little and bell-like as she gave the prayer in Korean, and everybody was like, look, isn't that wonderful? And considering that, Union had only recently had many women coming through. And then she gave it in English, and it was this huge attack on the patriarchy and that white hegemony, and and it was sort of like. So it took time, though, to figure out how to do that stuff and how to make those words not angry, just clear. In the mother, I rediscovered nature and the earth. And we know me, I'm a concrete priestess. I'm not big about the earth, but still it's important, even I know it's there. But as a girl child, you get chased in at night because it's not safe, although I spent plenty of nights in summer grass staring at the moon and stars. But city girls definitely don't hang around in the middle of parks looking at stars. Part of the spiritual practice around the goddess as I know her, required me to know where the moon was in her cycle and where the earth was in rotation around the sun. I know, sometimes more deeply than others, the rhythm of the earth's turnings. I know prayers of gratitude and petition to whisper at each swivel. Sorry. I'm losing myself here. Sorry. And I was hungry for a religious practice, and I got it in full measure. Am I faithful to that practice? Sometimes, not very, all the time. It's all of those things. Would I be healthier if I were? I believe so. Moving as far as we have from the earth leaves us with a damaged planet, unhealthy bodies, and maybe even stunted souls. I spent a lot of time in make-believe as a child and even as an adult. It wasn't always the sort of make-believe that's making up a story, a whole story, but rather a make-believe about having a life and doing wonderful things. None of the things I ever daydreamed about were things that interested me in the slightest. There's something in knowing that even my face is the face of God that freed me to impose discipline upon the dreams and make them plans. My daydreams were never so grand, and they never required me to realize them. I was always acted upon in those dreams. I was never the agent for change. The goddess is a demanding taskmistress, and she demands big dreams. The whole notion of gender became so much broader. I'd never been considered feminine. I was too loud, too bossy, too independent, too tall, too skinny. Some of those I've fixed. I'd always been ambitious, but I'd never directed that ambition, partially because it wasn't feminine to direct it toward your own life. Embracing the goddess allowed me to see the whole continuum of feminine, from the strongest warrior to the most tender flower. Embracing that femininity allowed me to become strong and acquire wisdom that was mine, that made sense to me, that enabled me to serve others as they were, whether male or female. I found the space to identify with what I was rather than what I was not. I could stay focused on what was right and just. I am not a half of something. I am enough as I am. I am a whole something at work with many other wholes. In addition to making marriages, I think we also strive towards community, towards communion. I also discovered a very uncomfortable mysticism. Remember, I'm female, born in the 50s to a white middle-class Protestant home. We knew all that stuff was so much hokum. So it was terrifying when I began to have visions, do out-of-body travel, do healings, hear voices. I was so lucky. I had a couple of professors, one who was a nun and the other who was just a wild woman. And I said, eek. And they said, and they said, in the end, I have closed that piece down for the moment. Whether there will ever be a time in my life where I do that again, I don't know, but I do know it's not easy. I need a fairly cloistered and disciplined life to do that, and that's not part of who I am and what I do right now. Now, I'm working here. I want more than anything for us to keep making the changes we have in front of us. What if we really became the valley with no hungry children? What if we offered a wide variety of health and worship opportunities? What if we raised great kids and fostered happy, successful, and daring adults? What if? I discovered ritual. I had to step very far outside where I was, all the way to the feminine and the circles that were cast on holidays. And still, I had to be pushed. I have a friend 15 years younger than I am, raised in a bolder time, who finally said, you know what you want to do? You want to do ceremony with people. And among other things, ritual really is what this particular Tigger does. Whether it's this service for church, which is pretty low ritual, a wedding that works as hard at building community as it does as uniting a couple, or a summer solstice in the woods for 300 women, or an ongoing observance of the earth's turnings with 30 dear friends. I've had 7 years of being the priestess to a woman's church. My relationship to the mother is a joyous thing for me. I became a psalmist in her honor. All the chants I write, all the daily musings, even the stories are freed up by that ritual energy. It's been great this summer to be doing weddings again for so many reasons. I've missed them. I've missed the grounding and the privilege of holding and touching people's lives so intimately. But I think the most important thing discovering the goddess did for me was it allowed me to become, and even forced me to become, kinder and more tender. Seminary, or at least union, is no different from any other advanced degree school. It's all about the head. For me, the goddess is all about relationship. It's vastly important I learned what I learned at Union. My sense of justice was finally honed. They tried to help me develop a systematic theology. But my theology is more like a quilt. Thank you, Jean Weston. What is right and what is just is nuanced and complicated and beautiful. So if I'd followed the arc that seminary had set for me, I'd have graduated, gotten a church, and fixed my life on a very different trajectory. Instead, I went out into the world trying to figure out how what I believed could be put to work, where, and how I could make a difference. For a time, it was very frightening. And then it was profoundly fulfilling. Maybe it would have been if I'd done what people whose theology was fairly well prescribed by their religion as well, but this suits me. But I'd have never celebrated 1,000 weddings or blessed the babies that came from those unions. I'd have never been free to come back home when I was needed. I'm not maternal. I never wanted kids. And for those reasons, for many years, I'd have been a fairly lousy candidate to be my parents' or my sister's companion, if, as I believed, the Great Mother had not pushed me. I'd have missed all of you if that happened. I'd have missed Steve, and I'd have missed the most extraordinary experiences in my life, walking with Mom and Dad and Deb into death. I've never done anything harder, and yet it's made me a much better woman. It's made me better suited to serve you and to work with you, and I believe that's because I have had her hands on my heart. That tenderness is now called outward. It's been interesting to me that my confidence and comfort in this relationship with the divine doesn't push me to look for followers for my belief system. I want to help you find who or what you are in relationship with, whatever that is, that helps you become wholehearted, strong, and searching. I'm also very curious about how you put it to work. I always want to know where your or theological rubber hits the road. I always want to know how will we make it better for those in our care? How, if you will, do we become the valley with no hungry children, or at least fewer? When I first got here, excuse me. Is this going to be a church cold, do we think? We hope not. When I first got here, and people heard what I'd done for years, they said, "Oh, are you a witch?" Sort of. I'm not all sure what that means for me, but for them, that meant I was in opposition to everything they believed. It was such hard work to do anything with them that made a difference. And so you'll rarely hear me use that word here. And I am very tired of the piety says that I don't have the only answer to every question. There's a piety that says that I have the only answer to every question. We see that a lot in this valley. No, in fact, no one does. The problems are complex. It's only with the insight that comes from a whole bunch of spiritual beliefs and understandings that will make a difference. I believe this is why UU, as Tandeka says, needs to be a lot bigger, as many of us bring our thoughts and our work to the table. I suspect you know very different things about love and loss than I do, and we need to know where your heart stands, so we need to know who we ask for help when. So let's stay focused on what is right and just. Let's just have fun together. Let's provide for ourselves and our community. Let's indulge the luxury of searching deep within. I looked, and there was the goddess. What do you find when you look? I've been reminded of one thing I've been reminded of when I've been writing about this is how much I miss chanting in a circle. So this morning, the choir has been helping me. The circle now is open, open and unbroken. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. The circle now is open, open and unbroken. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. The circle now is open, open and unbroken. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. The circle now is open, open and unbroken. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. The circle now is open, open and unbroken. So merry meet and merry part and merry meet again.